Hey there, folks. I wanted to really touch on a particular subject that I've been holding out on since news reported on it recently this week. And it's something so important that I want to double down and re-explain again. But I have receipts, so I want to show you something just so you can understand that I'm really on top of what is happening in the world. Like I'm trying to be a steward and a watchman and show you what to watch for, only to be validated later on, only to be proven right later on in this particular circumstance. But in other circumstances, like I've showed you before, where I said watch for Prince's son Ben Talal of Jordan to meet Pope Francis before they go do what the Bible says they're going to do, and they met. Watch for the 10 kings to come, which means we needed to see a new king in UK, a new king in Denmark, and that has happened. And so here we are again, where there's another situation that I've advocated people to watch for, and that is the topic of UFOs and aliens, which is a cover to get people prepared for a transitioning of the topic of alien UFOs going from science fiction to religion. That is the game. That is the play. So I want to show you briefly here exactly what I mean, and I want you to see receipts corroborating what I said to watch for. Okay, so we're going to take a look at this real quick, and let's take a look at first how long this may be a little lengthy than usual. But on my YouTube channel, if you type UFO and you scroll down, you can see there's many topics going back as far as 2015, where the topic of UFOs, hybrids, UFOs, Book of Revelation, planetary acquisition, UFOs, Pope Francis, UFO abductions, the list goes on and on and on. But I want you to see a couple of clips that I spoke on the topic of UFOs in the abduction phenomena, where they're reproducing, producing hybrid humans, which Jesus told us about, as it will be a replay of Genesis 6 from the days of Noah. So let's take a look at this. So here is what I said initially. Let's do this.
Every Christian needs to get ready for this, whether they like it or not. And that is the topic of UFOs, abduction, and hybrids. Now remember, Jesus tells us the end time would be like the days of Noah.
So you see how I'm explaining that the end times would be like the days of Noah. That's what Jesus says in Matthew 24:37. And the only distinctive thing that happened in the days of Noah, beings from above came down, took humans, and produced a race of hybrid giants. A race of hybrid giants. In this case, Jesus said it's going to happen again. Daniel also talks about it in Daniel chapter 2, where he says, they will mingle with the seed of men, but would not adhere to one another as iron doesn't mix with clay. So we're seeing a repeated pattern of what Jesus said to watch for, which is an abduction of humans by beings from above and creating a hybrid race.
Only one thing happened. Beings from above took women, got them pregnant, somehow genetically mutated the embryo to become giants, a hybrid race. And now, Jesus tells us also in the end time that she says that many will come in their name and say that they're Christ. This is the same many that came before in the book of Genesis.
So this is where I'm explaining how the prophecy that Jesus says begins the end times is with deception, followed by many false Christs. These false Christs are the hybrids that have been created on board the crafts of the UFOs through the abduction phenomenon and the reproductive program. And this is what I've been explaining for 10 years almost. It's trying to help you understand the play is to use the cover of aliens, UFOs from intergalactic and interplanetary beings, so that when they're deployed, they're going to fulfill what Jesus said, which is they're going to be Christ, which is they're false Christ, in which they're going to prop up Pope Francis. So this is how the play. This is the play, and this is what I've been trying to explain. Now watch this, because I want you to see I have receipts.
And we also saw in Daniel, in the end time, they will mingle with the seed of men. But we all know in the scripture, seed of man always means offspring, reproductive process of human beings. So all this leads to this topic and this phenomena of UFOs, abduction, and hybrids. So we're going to look at David Jacobs, who's an intel officer that covered this program. We're going to look at Bob Lazar, who also worked on the crafts to figure out how they worked. And we're going to look at Dr. David Jacobs, who covered many abductees and hear their testimonies about what they experienced.
So here's an article where I showed you the UFO left radiation burns and unaccounted for pregnancies, new Pentagon report claims. So this is from the Pentagon, where the Pentagon claims UFOs are abducting humans and women have unaccounted for pregnancies. And Jesus mentioned this as one of the things that will happen or repeat in the days leading to his return, the days of Noah, repeat of Genesis 6. So I'm trying to, again, help you understand the connection between what we have to see happening in our lifetime, in our era, that will point to the days leading to Jesus' second coming, so that we're not deceived. That's the whole point.
Experience in this reproductive program. Every Christian.
Okay, cool. Let's look at another one. All right. So here's this one right here, where again, I'm explaining.
Jesus said his return will be like the days of Noah. This is what he meant. Take a look at this.
The abduction phenomenon is clandestine. The way the secrecy prevails.
Now, this is Dr. David Jacobs, leading expert on the abduction phenomena. He's been interviewing abductees for decades. And he is a leading expert, I think, on this topic. I've read his book, which is called Walking Among Us, and The Threat, and others. But more importantly, he explains the program and the purpose and the function and what the abductees are being used for and what the hybrids will be used for. So, which I'm going to cover later.
Is that first and foremost, the abductees are not allowed to remember what happened to them. So when they do remember, it's not a full memory. It's in bits and pieces of memory. It's got dream material in it. It has material of perhaps some popular culture in it, and it's severely truncated usually. All abductions, all of them that I have looked at, are physical. People are physically missing from their normal environments.
Like Genesis 6.
They might be missing for 2 or 3 hours, where people search for them and call them, and they're not there, and there's an emergency call that they missed, and this and that, and parents have searched for their children, and children have searched for their parents. This is common.
Yeah, so what happened in Genesis 6 with beings from above taking people, what happened then is happening today, just as Jesus said it would. When Jesus said his return will be like the days of Noah.
So you see again how I'm trying to explain to you and help you see that this phenomena is real. This has happened. A replay of Genesis 6 that Jesus warned us about is in fact real, by a doctor who is interviewing abductees, by the Pentagon who is reporting unaccounted for pregnancies. This is a real phenomena. But let's keep going, because I want you to see now, what is the play behind this? What am I trying to help you understand about this phenomena?
Military and Pentagon is stating that these are not alien beings, since they set the precedent in the beginning in the 50s saying they are interplanetary alien beings. Now the narrative's changing that they're not, then what are they? It's simple. It leaves only for them to be spiritual beings. That's what's happening here. They're changing the story so that Satan can then change the world and change the narrative for the world to accept them as spiritual beings.
So see how I'm trying to help you understand and a really deep dive into understand the human hybrid program in connection with Pope Francis.
Because look, Jesus says that in the last days, it was said that take heed that no one will deceive you. Many will come in my name. Many of these. We're talking 1,000 to 2,000 of these crafts over 70 years abducting individuals and creating these hybrid species of Nephilims like they.
So what I'm explaining here is that the first reported case of an abduction happened in the 70s by Vias Boas in Brazil, in which he was abducted, taken aboard a craft, had a sexual encounter with another being, and she held her belly. And then later on, I think he said he saw a hybrid. But then we have another case where Betty and Barney Hill, who also abducted, and they have reproductive procedure done to them, where ova and sperm was taken from them. Later on, we see other abduction cases where the abductees would see hybrids that look really, really alien-like, and then decades later they look totally human. You can't really tell the difference because the next generation that's being interbreeded with other humans make them look more human and less alien, for lack of a better word. But this is going on for so long that now we're at the height of where they look practically human. That's what I'm trying to explain.
It did in Genesis 6. So it says here, make sure no one, many will come in my name saying that I am the Christ. And these individuals, these minis that Jesus is talking about, is going to accelerate the world to be lawless, just like it did in the book of Genesis.
So here I'm explaining how this hybrid program, and when these hybrids or these Nephilims are deployed into the world, it will be like an accelerant that will make God respond quicker, just as it did in the days of Noah. The days of Noah was so significant because the beings from above interbreeded with humans and created a race of giants, cannibal giants, and beings with elongated skulls and other type of creatures. So God had to respond by flooding the world, but it was this moment that was an accelerant that made the thought and evil of men continuously evil. So what we see happen in Genesis 6 is happening, or will happen again. Once these beings are deployed on the earth, they will be an accelerant to the evil that's on the planet. And that's what I'm trying to help you understand. And that's what I'm trying to explain in this video.
And he says the love of many will grow cold. And if it says, look, then if anyone says to you, look, he is here, look, here's the Christ, or there, do not believe it, for false Christ and false prophet will rise and show great signs and wonders to deceive, if possible, even the elect.
So this is where Jesus is talking about many false prophets and false Christs. That's these guys. That's the hybrids. These are the ones that's going to be deployed all throughout the world, who would then prop up Pope Francis and be false Christs and false prophets, and they're going to deceive. This is what I've said for almost 10 years in trying to explain to you all what to watch for and what the play is.
Therefore, I told you beforehand. Therefore, if they say to you, who's the they? These hybrids. This is the they. This is Genesis 6 2.0. These are the day that he's talking about. Look, he's in the desert. Do not go out or look. He is in the inner room. Do not believe it. This is the day he's talking about, folks. So you see the significance of why this is happening now. We see that we're one prophecy away from the third temple being rebuilt, per the Zechariah prophecy. We see that as prophecy is fulfilling in Israel, this scaling of this topic with UFOs and abductions is happening at the same time. We see that with the example that God has already showed us with Genesis, where these beings came down, manipulated the human race and species, which influenced and fueled evil, that God had to respond, is happening again with these beings from the sky coming down, manipulating the human race, and then setting the course of the world that is going to accelerate lawlessness, in which God has to then respond. So we see this is happening. But now you're like, well, how could this go from a topic of aliens to a topic of spiritual beings? Not everyone's going to accept the Pentagon.
See, that's a very good question that I pose, because right now they're all being accepted as aliens from another planet. So what will make them go from an interplanetary creature to spiritual beings? Who's going to be the salesman for that?
And they kind of can't reach and stretch over the world. So how can that happen? I'm glad you asked that question, because Pope Francis said he would. He said he would baptize these creatures, these aliens. He is the one that will convert this conversation from aliens to spiritual beings, baptizing them as if Jesus died for these creatures, these hybrids, just like Jesus didn't die for angels, didn't die for giants, didn't die for these hybrids. He died for descendants of Adam and Eve. But Pope Francis, who leads over billions of people who are Catholics, who follow him, and what he says is law, if he declares that these individuals should be baptized, this whole conversation changed to a spiritual conversation overnight. And that's how it's going to happen. That's how we're seeing this all play out.
So you see, this is how the play, this is how things were unraveled. Imagine if Pope Francis resurrects and he walks out of a UFO craft. He walks out of a UFO craft. No one's going to think these UFOs are interplanetary beings or intergalactic beings. They're going to think they're spiritual brothers, especially if he's accompanied with these hybrids behind him. So should an event like that happens, then his presence or his association with the UFOs and the hybrids changes the entire conversation from a sci-fi conversation to a religious conversation. But that's the play. That's the deception that I've been trying to warn folks about. Now, if this isn't, let's finish watching this clip, and I just want you to see what a congressional member of Congress had just said about this very topic.
Is that now they're being changed from a topic of not alien, then what? Then the spiritual, and if spiritual, can we baptize? If baptized, boom, points to Jesus, who said, do not believe them. Many Christs are going to come. They are going to tell you I'm here. They're going to tell you I'm there. Don't believe it. They're going to do signs, lines, and wonders. So this is what I want to prepare you for, folks. And you can see how this ties to the book of Revelation. So tell me what you thought. I really hope this was that.
Okay, so now let's look at, I've showed you evidence for a decade of me talking about this topic. I explained how Jesus' prophecy of a repeat of Genesis 6. I explained to you the reproductive program. I explained to you the hybrids and how they've been watered down from the 70s to present to look almost identical to humans. I told you about how they'll be deployed throughout the earth, and how their association with Pope Francis will convert the conversation from a sci-fi conversation to a religious conversation, and that this is a real phenomenon that Jesus warned us about. And of course, people ridicule and laugh. They was like, what are you talking about? You're stupid. This is not real. Well, guess what a congressional member of Congress just said about this very topic? Hear it for yourself.
In a military uniform, worked for the United States Army, that was briefing me on the locations of hybrid breeding programs where captured aliens were breeding with humans to create some hybrid race.
Did you hear what he said? A military official from the Pentagon debriefed him on a hybrid alien breeding program where aliens are breeding with humans to create a hybrid race. This is coming from a congressional member of Congress, or ex-member of Congress. But this is what he was briefed on. That's why when we were having those UFO discussions last year, and they were talking about the UFOs disclosure, they failed to talk about the abductions. That is what I was waiting for them to discuss, which they never did. They didn't talk about the abductions. So let's hear this ex-member of Congress again talk about his debrief.
I mean, I had someone come and brief me who was in a military uniform, worked for the United States Army, that was briefing me on the locations of hybrid breeding programs where captured aliens were breeding with humans to create some hybrid race that could engage in intergalactic communication. An actual uniform member of the United States Army briefed me on that.
See? Now you hear someone from Congress who's part of the United States government being told by an official of the Pentagon about the very thing that I've been trying to warn you all about, and that they're breeding humans to create a race. This is why Jesus said many false Christs. We're not talking about a couple dozen people. We're talking about planetary acquisition deployment. So you see that this is not me. This is coming from a member of Congress, part of the United States government, who was debriefed by a military official from the Pentagon. So as you can see, I didn't say it, but I have receipts.
Non-human biologics.
They never give a
interracial
name. They never give a name.
Mating. What the F is going on? Look, wait a second. You had whistleblowers tell you this kind of thing? Can you please unpack that?
Yeah, I had a guy who was uniformed. He was a senior enlisted with the United States Army. Came into my office in Crestview, Florida, in a non-classified setting. I had members of my staff there, and what they explained is that the military ran a very secret program where aliens that were living were in forced breeding programs with humans that had been abducted from war zones and from even the caravans of migrants.
That's not true. The abductees are taken all across the world, and the way they interbreed with them is they take ovosperm from male and female, and then they when they combine the two, they enter another gene into another DNA into it, which is foreign. That gene then makes a zygote, in which then causes the embryo to grow. And then they put that embryo into a gestation tube, and their nutrients in which they get, which is a artificial embryonic fluid that a baby would get from their mother, they get from this gestation tank. And there are hundreds of gestation tanks where they get all the nutrients from the fluid that they're encapsulated in. So this is how the breeding program is done. Then when they come to term, the baby is born, and then they're also associated back to the abductee to say, this is like your baby, treat it like your child. And then they grow up to try to learn what being human is like. What's a fork? What's a chair? How to use a pencil? Why do humans like things that don't like them? This the concept of being a human. That is what, by all accounts, per Dr. David Jacobs' research shows. That is what's being done.
Now, again, I didn't verify this, but what the whistleblower was telling me is that there were like between 6 and 12 locations around the country where this happened. And what he wanted was a group, members of Congress, to all show up at the same time at all of these different locations so that any of those activities could not be moved. And of course, it's a physical impossibility to get members of Congress to simultaneously show up at like 8 locations at one time. And so that never occurred.
What do you mean non-human biologics?
I mean, I had someone come and
see, you notice how see, folks, this is a soft disclosure that's happening, all to prepare us for a full deployment of these beings. First, they're called aliens. Now they're being called non-human biologics because they're human. They have human DNA with a foreign DNA that makes them a hybrid. So instead of calling them, they slowly getting Americans in the world to stop calling them alien, call them non-human biologics. Well, if they're non-human biologics, they're hybrids. So to call them non-human biologics is just a soft disclosure, a soft way of trying to sell it to you. But the point that I'm trying to help you understand here is that this is real. This is what's happening. This is what I've been trying to inform you all about for so long. And now we're coming to closer and closer that I'm even leaning more towards the UFO abduction hybrid program and phenomena is going to play a role with Pope Francis, so that when Pope Francis returns or resurrects, as I mentioned recently in Daniel 8 and in Revelation 17, if he's accompanied with the UFO crafts or the hybrids, overnight the topic of non-human, go from alien, non-human biologics to our spiritual leaders. They're Christ, they're Christ-like. And that's what Jesus warned us about. This is, in fact, the deception that Jesus has told us and warned us about, which will be a replay of Genesis 6, where beings from above are coming down to populate the earth and deceive and push the earth towards judgment so God's hand can respond, just as it did in the days of Noah with the flood. This is an evil that's going to be an accelerant on the earth like the world has never seen before. And I have receipts. I've tried to warn you folks ahead of time. So keep watching and endure.